Hello, welcome to the Critical Move Hotel Sur. Once again, the Mediterranean Sea is the scene of disputes between countries in the area. This time, nations that have historically maintained strained relations are once again facing. On the recent disagreements between France and Turkey involving NATO, the European Union and Libya. We'll be talking about this today. Let's deploy the board. It starts the first move. France, whose frigate corvette had an incident in Mediterranean waters in June with a Turkish warship, announced that the European Union's foreign ministers will soon discuss relations with Ankara. The Elysee gave a glimpse of what would be considered as new sanctions against the Eurasian country, in addition to the measures taken in view of the drilling that on the Ottoman nation in the economic zone corresponding to Cyprus. After meeting with Josep Borrell, let's hear the reactions of the Turkish state through its foreign minister. If the European Union takes further decisions against Turkey, we'll be forced to reciprocate. What will happen? The situation will become more tense. Will this serve anyone? No. Making decisions against Turkey at these meetings will not solve any problems, but it will make them worse. We are showing goodwill. But if the European Union takes new decisions against Turkey, we will have to retaliate. We would support the European Union as an agent in these other matters, provided it is an honest agent, as they say, honest agent. Well, I use it in that sense. If you address the problems as an honest agent, rather than in solidarity with the European Union, we are ready to work. You have to look at what France says about what happened in the Mediterranean with same honesty. France has not told the truth to the European Union or NATO. It is not true that our ships were aiming French ships. We have proved this on the basis of documents and reports. Our expectation now is that France will apologize to us clearly and unconditionally for bringing out this false information. Turkey is not respecting any of the commitments of the Berlin Conference, has increased its military presence in Libya, and has massively re-imported Shiite fighters from Syria. This is a high responsibility for anyone claiming to be a member of NATO. We talk about the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, regional issues such as Libya and Syria, as well as the general state of relations between the European Union and Turkey, which are not going through the best of times. We have to work together to improve it. Turkey is a key partner. The fact that we in Europe discuss Turkey extensively only reflects the importance we attach to this relationship, and the advantages of talking to the minister is that we can talk frankly, openly, and with a constructive approach, because today the situation is far from ideal. I have spoken to the French president about this incident that is being investigated at NATO. The report of the investigation is not yet ready, but we should do everything possible to ensure that such incidents are not repeated among NATO allies. It's a very serious matter. What's the so-called Sea Guardian operation about? What is it based on? Let's review. In July 2015, the North Atlantic Council, NATO's main decision-making body, decided to change the operation Active Endeavour or Active Effort, designed to prevent the movement of terrorists or weapons of mass destruction in the Mediterranean Sea, to one based on networks rather than platforms or units. 1 year later, on November 9, 2016, NATO announced the launch of its new maritime security mission in the area under the name of Sea Guardian, with the aim of providing support in terms of logistic and information exchange to the European Union's Operation Sophia, in charge of fighting mafia trafficking in migrants. Since the beginning, the operation sought to develop a robust domain of the maritime environment, combining sensors and non-sensor-based networks through reliable connectivity between partners and Mediterranean-related bodies. One of the main collaborators in this operation was Spain, which made the Mistral submarine available. In addition to carrying out air patrol days, Italy, Turkey, Bulgaria, Portugal, and Greece have also joined the operation. The mission has one or two planes that patrol the Mediterranean area every day, while each participating country establishes the areas to be covered. Ships, submarines, and maritime surveillance aircraft carry out activities to detect acts of terrorism and strengthen the capacity of the regional navies. In short, Sea Guardian operation is born from the transformation of the anti-terrorist mission active effort, approved at the Warsaw Summit to respond to new challenges in terms of security in the Mediterranean Sea. The outcome of these remarks is shared and discussed with NATO Maritime Command at its British headquarters in Northwood. Let's map out the extensive and strategic area that covers the Mediterranean Sea. Mediterranean Sea, focus of historical tensions. With a surface area of approximately 2.5 million square kilometers and a length of 3,860 kilometers, the Mediterranean is an island sea that connects to Atlantic Ocean through the Strait of Gibraltar. It is surrounded by Europe, Asia, and Africa. Historically, it has witnessed the evolution of various civilizations, such as the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Hebrews, the Greeks, the Carthaginians, and the Romans. Its waters, both the Iberian, Italic, and Balkan peninsulas in Europe, and the Anatolian Peninsula in Asia. It also communicates with the Black Sea through the Straits of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, and with the Red Sea through the Suez Channel. The Mediterranean is surrounded by Italy, Spain, Gibraltar, France, Monaco, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, Greece, Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Malta, and Cyprus. These nations have formed and continue to form a very dangerous neighborhood. Civil wars, insurrections, invasions, famines, genocides, droughts, attacks by pirates and mercenaries have made the region one of the most unstable on the planet. In addition, the most recent wave of migration from North America to Europe has resulted in the death of more than 1 million people, earning it the nickname Mare Mortum instead of the name once given to it by the Roman Empire, Mare Nostrum. It is also the sea with the highest rates of hydrocarbons under its bed, especially gas, and one of the most polluted in the world. I'd like to suggest to you the reading of an article titled Growing Tension Between France and Turkey Weakens NATO, written by Jean Masdou and published on La Vanguardia digital site. I select some of its paragraphs. The tensions between France and Turkey have been going on for a long time, but the upsurge of recent days, including the incident involving warships, shows the fragility and limits of NATO, within which the two countries are also settling their differences. Turkey has always been a fractious, uncomfortable, but necessary ally, but today it is more irritating than ever. It is touching all the red lines. One of them was stepped on last year when it decided to acquire the Russian S-400 air defense system, an ally buying material from NATO's longtime enemy, and in times of high tension between Moscow and the Atlantic Organization. This is the context of the growing confrontation between Paris and Ankara, with France particularly active in countering Turkey's involvement in the conflict in Libya. Paris already harshly criticized by Turkey's military intervention in northern Syria last October, and now the focus is on Libya. It's almost personal between Macron and Erdogan, say allied sources. Completing a pessimistic analysis, they see that the conflict is dragging on, that is moving from Syria to Libya, and therefore is located in the center of the Mediterranean, and that the beneficiary of so much division might be the omnipresent Russia. In Libya, France is the only European country considered to support the rebel general Khalifa Haftar, although official Paris has declared itself neutral, while Turkey has intervened militarily in favor of the Tripoli government. The latest and most serious episode of this confrontation between France and Turkey took place on July 10, and the versions of the two sides differ. According to Paris, one of its frigates, the Corvette, was readily lit by a Turkish warship when it wanted to inspect a suspicious vessel heading for Libya. Crater lighting is the equivalent of gunfire, and if confirmed, would be one of the most serious incidents between two allies. However, the Turkish version differs radically, denying that anyone was targeted and asking France to apologize for these accusations. The French frigate was involved in an operation to monitor the arms embargo on Libya, but was unable to inspect the suspected vessels escorted by Turkish frigates. Faced with internal conflict, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg turned to the side. He did not want to be seen as an ally and announced the opening of an investigation, which for the moment has not reached any conclusion. Such violence upset France, which announced its withdrawal from the NATO operation in the Mediterranean Sea Guardian. The disagreements with Turkey are not new, but the level they are reaching with NATO is, and one reason that helps explain this is Washington's inaction. The truth is that Turkey is showing increasing aggression toward European countries. Its hydrocarbon prospecting on the continental shelf of Cyprus has been condemned by the EU, and it has been even adopted sanctions, albeit lightly. On the other hand, everyone remembers the incidents on the Greek-Turkish border in February, when Ankara encouraged the refugees of its territory to go to Greek territory. Let's take our first break in a critical move. Remember, there's a strategic move in social media for you to participate. Growing tensions between France and Turkey put in check the European Union and NATO. The icing on the cake is divided on Libya and its gas resources in waters of the Mediterranean. Who has to lose in these geopolitical polls? Leave your opinion. Let's take a short break. We'll be back soon.
Infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the Empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
The ties between France and Turkey have been strained in recent weeks, with Libya at the center of the dispute. Let's make some context. Incidents during a NATO operation in the Mediterranean have strengthened Franco and Turkish relations, particularly around the Libyan conflict. France informed NATO that it would be suspend its participation in the naval operation after accusing Turkish warships of allegedly aggressive stance against its warship Courbet after it tried to inspect the ship in June. According to the French Ministry of Defense, the Turkish ship carried out 3 radar illuminations on their vessel while identifying a freighter suspected of carrying weapons. The Turkish government asked the French executive to apologize for what it considers a false report on the incident. However, in a statement, the French government described what happened near the Libyan coast, where 2 parallel governments are fighting to impose themselves, as an aggressive maneuver. Let's keep in mind that Libya is the scene of a war as a consequence of NATO's aggression in 2011. The military incursion led by the US and France allowed the assassination of a Gandalf leader Muammar, and from then on a socio-political chaos was unleashed that has kept the tribal country split in 2 until today. On one hand, the so-called unity government based in Tripoli, represented by Fayez al-Fahad, recognized by the UN and supported by Turkey. It should be noted that at the end of last year, the executive Recep Tayyip Erdogan signed an agreement on maritime borders and gas extraction in the Mediterranean Sea. The fact increased the tensions between Turkey and Greece. On the other hand, there is a government led by a commander of the Libyan National Army, Marshal Khalifa Haftar, in the northeastern port city of Tobruk and supported by France. We start the analysis in a critical move. We have from Argentina, Jorge Luis Obertali, international media writer, and from Qatar, Rafael Robles, PhD in Persian Gulf Studies, Master of Arts in Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar, and political scientist at UNAM. Welcome both of you. Jorge Luis, here we see 2 sides that also coincide with Libya. Until what dimensions could this conflict between France and Turkey reach? Hello, how are you? And to all the viewers of Telesur. From the overthrow, in which several countries, like the United States, participated, it became practically a failed state, where everyone is inciting the resources that are there, and fundamentally one of the countries that supports the government, recognized by the UN, and taking away the gas pipelines that go to their country. Italy has historically occupied Libya. At some point, it was violated by Libyan fighters. So what happened is that both France and Turkey have agreed to support one or the other candidate and to take over Libyan resources, which seems to be impossible. As I told you before, one supported by Italy and Turkey, and it seems that also by sectors of the Islamic State, and on the other hand, the General Khalifa Haftar, who supported by Russia, France, Arab Emirates, and Egypt. And then they are enjoying the control of the country. But not only are they enjoying the energy resources there, but now there is also the situation of the COVID-19. As I said before, there's the issue of the Turkish frigate, which warned the French frigate that it was impinging on a Turkish cargo ship, which was carrying charges and messages to the national government. But I'm not going to talk about that. But I'm going to talk to you about what's really in conflict there in Libya, and all these countries that are coming together in one way or another through their contradictions for the control of the country. For the aquifer in Libya, which is 1,000 to 150,000 liters of drinking water, which is an artificial way can give water to all of Libya. Now the pipes of that aquifer were bombed when they killed Abaski, and then these natural resources are also disputed because the one who controls the water of that region controls Libya, Egypt, and Sudan, but fundamentally Libya, where all this has been industrialized in some way. There are 103,000 artificial water wells. Whoever controls all this controls practically the whole region, the economy, the exports, and there's a conflict that can't be solved. But from this conflict, NATO, which is an organization that practically does not exist because it depends on the United States, is involved in this confrontation in Russia because NATO is acting against Russia in the framework of the conflicts it has against the United States. The United States seems not to be involved in this. I think we necessarily have to go back to what happened in 2011, the outbreak of the war in Libya. Stay with us to reflect on this aspect with Rafael Robles, who is also with us today. Rafael, there's a question, there's an element here that we can't lose sight of, that France is accusing Turkey to be arming one of these two forces that coexist today in Libya, and it's fueling the conflict in that nation. But I repeat, we cannot lose sight that in 2011, the France of Nicolas Sarkozy had a leading role along with NATO and the US in the overthrow and murder of the leader Muammar Gaddafi. And as a result, we have the Libya that we can see today. Is that right? Ray, it is always a pleasure to be with you. Good evening from Qatar. And certainly, we have to understand that conflict in Libya as the result of an intervention by NATO and the allies. That is, what we have today is the product of that intervention. France makes an accusation to Ankara that it is taking action, but we cannot forget that if it had not been for the intervention of Turkey in Libya, there would have already been disastrous military solution, a humanitarian crisis, and the current 500,000 internally displaced persons would be much worse. Not only did Turkey avoid a military solution, but also Turkey, by supporting the national Khalif Haftar government, was able to avoid the capture of the capital of Tripoli by the Caliph. Although the order for arms was failed in Libya, the Turkish intervention had the advantage of avoiding a humanitarian crisis. However, what we have to observe is a number of international organizations that are at stake, and what is their real and political power. And while the United Nations is implementing an armed embargo on Libya, two of the members of the National Security Council have been arming the government's counterpart in National Accord, that is, the Libyan army of Khalif Haftar. On the one hand, Russia with its mercenaries of the Haftar group, and on the other hand, France, that we say the government of national agreement, discovered a series of armaments of state origin, bought by France to strengthen the armament of Khalif Haftar. Both parties, no one can say that it's clean. The accusations of France lose meaning. The question then is the dispute between Turkey and France would be, how much should two allied members of NATO respect united relations, and to what extent? And that's what Paris is looking for in the region. It will have to be discussed. It seems to me that Paris made a miscalculation by betting on Khalif Haftar. We saw in Khalif Haftar the strong man of Libya who could stop the Islamists But you also have to understand the politics of the bet that France made on Khalif Haftar to set a man who could be the device of a new neo-colonial policy in Africa, as France has been doing. However, France was wrong, and since Macron could not have enough allies and the support of the European Union, which remains neutral in this decision, France had to turn to the support of the Arab Emirates, to this Gulf country, and this geopolitical struggle that the Arab Emirates also have with Turkey in the Mediterranean becomes much complicated. Now we have to understand Libya not only as its territory but also with the migration problem. Turkey has a much tighter control policy in the eastern Mediterranean, and the situation that some countries such as France and Cyprus are now supporting. We have a situation of readjustment in the whole of the eastern Mediterranean. How do you describe France's position within the European Union with respect to Turkey? There are specialists who say that it is trying to torpedo Turkey's entry into the bloc and has done so for the last few years. Do you think the same? I totally agree. A few weeks ago, President Macron said that NATO seemed to be brain dead. That is, France is indirectly saying that NATO has little functionality. France has a hard time recognizing that Turkey is a member of NATO. However, Turkey knows that its role in NATO is very important. France has been isolated in the European Union, and it seems that this moment to attack Turkey in a very high narrative is a very desperate way out for France to not know how to openly and publicly acknowledge that it failed in its bid to Khalif Haftar. So it's a desperate move by France. France will not be able to reposition itself in Libya for the time being. And frankly, I would say that there is a winner in the political system. This is largely the result of the instability generated by the pandemic and the absence of Washington, and it has taken steps backwards and let other forces take over. The anti-terrorism discourse has to do with the so-called Islamism that they associate with the government of national accord, with political Islamism. Even France is trying to add the anti-Turkish policy. The government of Algeria, allied with Egypt and France, can no longer hide that it supported Haftar for a long time, although now it is trying to manifest a neutral position. But France was wrong. It turned away, it looked for allies who are now enemies. Thank you so much. Jorge, I have left you for this moment of the interview and for that moment. Why do I do that? Because you were referring to a confluence of countries in North Africa, which is very interesting. North Africa, where, by the way, France also had a role, that by drawing conclusions from what Rafael has just explained, it is losing more and more importance. Yes, as I was telling you, this conflict between Russia, Turkey, and the European Union, as NATO explains through its spokesman, they are playing dumb because it is in their interest that Turkey stays in NATO, depending on their relationship with the Mediterranean, between Europe and the Near East. And precisely what they don't want is countries like Italy, that immigrants keep coming, Italy and Turkey that have left Syria after being expelled as members of the Islamic State by the Syrian army. So Turkey is like a kind of rector there in NATO because it is not an European country. Obviously, Turkey is an Asian country, and it is also a Muslim country. So I think that these contradictions are only for economic interests, for the purposes of alliances that are made. If we can say that NATO is practically condemned to failure because it has no enemy to fight. It is an appendix of the Pentagon of the United States with the function of containing the so-called Russia. Because on the other hand, Russia, through the aquifers that it's building, and it does not make any sense to continue talking. There is no contradiction, no logic, no politics. We must continue talking about commercial prohibitions within the framework of the age of capitalism worldwide, which we have even within the framework of this pandemic that nobody knows how to stop. So really, in this sense, France is a country that pretends to preserve a certain independence against the influence of the United States. This has been seen in Lucia Malvinas when she supplied the Argentina military against the arrogance of Great Britain. And obviously, it is a country that bets on its interests, like all those countries around it. But in spite of the gas and oil, the aquifer that is in Libya and in other countries in the region, such as Egypt and Sudan, it is very important to keep in mind that whoever controls the water in the region will control the region, the economy, and its foreign policy. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Jorge Luis. Hugs for you. Talk to you soon. And thank you also, Rafael, for your time for our critical move. Let's take another break. Remember, there is a strategic move in social media for you to participate with those. So it goes like this. Growing tensions between France and Turkey put in check the European Union and NATO. The icing on the cake is the divided one Libya and its gas resources in waters of the Mediterranean. Who has to lose in this geopolitical pause? Stay with us. We'll be back soon. How have the political relations between Turkey and France behaved? Let's review the context. The links between France and Turkey have been marked by political differences on issues such as the accession of Ankara to the European Union, and on historical issues such as the Armenian genocide. The massacre of Armenians between 1915 and 1917 left more than 1.5 billion dead, according to official figures. The actions were executed by Turkey against the Armenian population of the Ottoman Empire in the context of the First World War. The Turkish state has never recognized this death as genocide. It claims that it was a civil war in which between 300,000 and 500,000 people were killed. Out of the 193 countries of the United Nations Organization, only about 20, including France, have recognized the Armenian genocide. Throughout history, Paris has taken a firm stand and criminalized Ankara's position on the issue. In parallel, the LSE has conditioned the European Union on the accession of Turkey as a member state. For this reason, bilateral relations cooled down during the previous decade, especially under the mandate of Nicolas Sarkozy, who was strongly opposed to the negotiations between the Turkish government and the community bloc. However, from 2012, France and Turkey have expressed their desire to open a new era in relations, despite maintaining conflicting positions on the Libyan issue. Both states show common interests, so they have established economic commercial links. We will continue with the analysis. We have in the studio Bassem Tassaldini, international analyst and expert on Middle East issues and the Islamic world. And when we talk about the Islamic world, we're talking about these countries where NATO's countries started a conflict, and now and it's been a policy since long ago. Divide and you will conquer, destroy and you will conquer. And therefore, I told you before, I didn't share Rafa's opinion, having said that France played failure framework like a horse with a broken leg, as we say here in our popular words. But I don't think so. So despite the defeats that Khalid Haftar has been suffering in Turkey, does he have possibilities to take over Tripoli? It's like that war is not always about going forward and winning. And it is not because I have a personal opinion. No. It's more like all the configuration of forces. And that indicates big possibilities that Khalifa has to win on this land, as you said before. Supported, promoted by France, one of the big actors in this story, as well as the United States. Let's remember the administration of Nobel Prize for Peace. As a paradox, Barack Obama is one of the main actors. Also in other European countries, in a minor way, Italy, Spain, who participated in that war. But some of them already are reaping what they sow. There are big reservoirs of oil and gas who are being used by French companies, on the ground most of all. But what interests the most, and that is the contradiction between two nations, countries with the most big oil fields, Mediterranean fields, the delimitation that interests to Turkey, because that put Turkey facing another country such as Greece. And there is the dispute between Greece, and it is a dispute that comes almost near to a war. Also, we see Cyprus that maintains even from Roman Empire times, and it keeps it under its power. But there is the fact of that old dream that insists on maintaining, despite of the big defeats it have had, especially in Syria. But it still sees in Syria big possibilities of rebuilding that dream. And since you're talking about Syria, the participation of Turkey in Syria, we will be talking about that today. That is one of the geopolitical blackmail that it is using against the administration of argument. They say that it's been because of them that there is chaos in that bordering position between Syria and Turkey. I say geopolitical blackmail because it intends to forget the participation in the war of Libya. Yes, it is a blackmail. They have used, let's say, the speech, they have to end it. Both of them, with the speech of the ones who are not participating, they are openly participating in that war. France have earned a lot of profits with this war, because it turns out that under the rule of they have the biggest oil fields, and they're using it by other French companies. And it's not like that. National agreement that is supported by Mr. Erdogan on in that controlled territory, under the control that has very important oil fields. And Erdogan expects to win and support the national agreement to defeat the forces of Haftar and take over the oil fields that are today in France's possession. So that is why I do not agree with Rafael's words. The only thing that Haftar has against him is his old age. But in spite of that, he has everything in favor. 8 years ago, it was formed that government, but it was broken, and then it started a national agreement government titled by them. But it's only dedicated to focus on Tripoli, but has done a very important pact with some countries such as Turkey. And the most important is right there, that France, to be in the Mediterranean, has provoked this naval incident, because since 2011, at the beginning of the war, I remember those important resolutions of the United Nations. The first one, 1970, it issued an embargo of weapons. So it was there to avoid the weapons to get to Libya, and the world knows, the United States know, that is the beginning of this conflict, and the bad called government of unity agreements or national agreements in Tripoli. So the fundamentalist government, even though she doesn't wear fundamentalist clothing, but it has this characteristic. But all the forces that goes with this government, forces that go along with the so-called Islamic State and the Mislata militias, because during the Ottoman Empire, one of the forces that Turkey has from a long time, even in the Roman Empire, Turkey displaced Turkish populations to all over Arab territories occupied. To what objective? Precisely to take over the control of those territories, such as it happened with the Soviet Union and the countries that came after that. And the ex-Soviet Pact, important communities, Russian communities, were displaced to all those places. And today, those places, there is the most important militia in the war of Libya in 2011. They have Turkey's ascendants. So naturally, they answer to Turkey, and Turkey answers back to them. So the understanding of that false government, and to be able to accomplish in the future, to take over territories that today are controlled by hostile forces, but also for United States, Russia, and other countries of the region, Egypt, and other countries in the region. And in this case, and he supports it because he fears an expansion or rebreak of the Muslim Brotherhood, because Egypt has a border, yes, to support it with so much strength to Khalif Haddaf. It is the confrontation, decided confrontation against the militia supported by Turkey and that bad called national government of Sarraf, because those militias are linked to Muslim Brotherhood. They are the foundations that started on the beginning with France, but today they have it today in Turkey, because all of these groups, they all answer to Turkey and the government of current president. So that's for Egypt. It is so important. It's vital. It's a life or death matter, that they have to support a government that have to face military forces that go against these fundamentalist groups. I repeat, France is responsible too. Where do they have all those weapons? Of course, they get it from Turkey, but where do they get it? Even Turkey, where do they get it? They got it from France, from the United Kingdom, from Germany, from the United States. And now they come and they fill that country with terrorism, with weapons. And we're talking about a country that it's only divided from Europe by the Mediterranean Sea. But there are militias there is also human trafficking. The refugees, slavery has come back to Libya. And we have to say France, it's responsible. There's a game of microphones, there are cynicism. If they accomplish, if the European Union, yes, that I do share what Macron said, especially NATO. It has a brain death, such as Emmanuel Macron said in one of his speeches. We are facing a world where globalization, alliances, international alliances, recognized for so long. The United States had a primacy and Europe kept on working on under the international policy by the United States. But today it's not like that anymore. And there is where you find the big contradictions. And it is important what Emmanuel Macron said, to recognize that today it has a brain death. There is a real division. European Union doesn't have the capacity to resolve this. Turkey is determined to get back territories, to take over big oil fields. Turkey doesn't have oil. Turkey doesn't have oil. It has to go look for it in neighboring countries. And that is why it is explained the aggression to Iraq by Turkey, supporting similar terrorist groups that it have taken out of Syria and taken them into them, because believe that where it has the right conditions to win and take over. But I believe it's in a development that it won't be able to defeat nor one or the other, but it has big possibilities. Khalif Haddad, because of all the support that has the popular support that he has in Libya, even though people don't talk about it. The Green, that they're still have it. It's a very deep and strong feeling. And after this destruction, many of those who thought they were opposers to Gaddafi, they realized they made a big mistake by supporting these false revolutions. So the result is right there on the field. Yes, it is like that. Therefore, I think events are still about to be seen. It is. We'll see very interesting changes. Thank you so much for your participation. Let's go to conclusions. On the verge of a conflict that would put the entire Mediterranean basin on edge, the European Union is trying to calm tensions between Turkey, determined to respond to any measure, and France, which is fanning the flames against Ankara. NATO, increasingly weakened, and a sign of this in this brawl between its own members, prefers to feign insanity. Other issues, such as the recent tensions with the Trump administration, seem to interest him more. And while these powers are testing their strength, the conflict in Libya, once again in the mercy of the highest bidder, remains unsolved. The peace of the people who enjoyed civil rights remains unresolved, and after the bloody invasion of the Atlantic Alliance was balkanized. It's what is happening today in the area, the result of a plan carefully designed between Western actors. Time will tell. For today, we close the geopolitical board.